Thanks, Jaclyn, for agreeing to be a guest on Spotlight on Spirit. This is the place, the podcast, where hopefully we can have really safe conversations about who we are and how it influences our sphere of influence, if you will.
Mhm.
Um, I met you at National American Legion College, and you are a unique individual, and I enjoyed you immensely.
Well, thank you.
One of the things about you is you walk with a cane.
Yes, sometimes I walk with a cape.
And I was very curious about who you are. When did that cane come into your life? And then your outlook on life. Sometimes the cane didn't match the outlook on life.
Well, I mean, my cane does have polka dots on it, so it somewhat does match my outlook on life. Uh,
Yeah.
when I got out of the service, I didn't know it, but I had some ticking time bombs in my body that were genetic.
Oh,
I have been diagnosed with 7 different autoimmune diseases. So I live with very dynamic disabilities. Some days it's like I could move mountains, and some days the mountain is laying on top of me.
oh my
So
goodness.
I have various aids that I use for mobility and
Mhm.
things of that nature, which gets me some funny looks sometimes, especially given my age.
Mhm.
But yeah, so it, I would actually argue that my outlook on life is due to my dynamic disabilities and not in spite of.
Ooh, can you talk more about that?
Yeah. So um, I guess I would have to go back a little bit
Okay.
earlier. Life was never easy in my household. I had a lot of childhood trauma, adolescent trauma, and then adult trauma, which probably all fed into the autoimmune diseases that reared their ugly head later.
Sure.
I'm also a 2-time cancer survivor in my
Okay.
20s. Um, so when I got sick, I was actually in like the peak health that I had ever been in. I was like 9% body fat. I could leg press 600, 600 pounds. I had just
Jeez.
won in a fitness competition, and I went from being at peak physical health, mother of two, to my husband having to pick me up and carry me into the restroom in a matter of weeks, if not months.
Oh my
And
goodness.
it took a couple years to get diagnosed with what was
Mhm.
wrong with me. So when your whole identity rapidly changes, it's not an easy thing to go through.
Yeah.
Especially not when you're used to doing everything and you're super strong, and to be weak and have to change your entire life. You have to do a lot of soul searching and hard
Yeah.
work and hard
Some
work.
people some people would describe that as a dark night of the soul experience.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it was absolutely not an easy thing to go through at
Mhm.
all. It's still, I mean, even though I'll put a good face on it a lot, it's still not an easy thing to go through. There were very, very, very dark times. You know, sitting in the bottom of a pit, not sure if you even want to get out of it. What's
Right.
the point? Things of that nature. I was very lucky that I have the most amazing saint-like husband
Uh-huh.
who never left my side through the whole thing. Um, but but even he can't do the work. So
Yep.
um, acceptance is a huge thing to work towards and to experience. And a lot of it for me is having to hold on to a moment as opposed to an idea of what life is supposed to be like.
And you're a driven human being. My experience from you.
I definitely don't like to sit still.
No. Has that always been a part of who you are, or is it something that is a result of, deciding what you're going to do and how you're going to live your life after the diagnoses?
I've always been motivated to learn
Okay.
and experience things, but I would say the drive to do things definitely matured and grew through my diagnoses and my working through the issues revolving them. When you are faced with something that will make you severely disabled
Yeah.
or potentially end, terminally, one of I think I would be fair to say a lot of people, that song "Live Like You're Dying." I'm gonna
Mhm.
do as much as I can do for as long as I can do it, so I can look back with as few regrets as possible.
One of the things that I was really curious about with you is that Cain didn't define you. Your Cain lives with you.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I don't know if you had to work for that, or, when you're trying to transform from, you said you lifted 600 pounds?
I used to leg press 600 pounds. I was really strong.
Oh my gosh.
I used to make the boys jealous at the gym.
Oh my gosh.
But
Okay.
outshoot them and outlift them. I mean, what can I say?
What branch of the service did you serve in?
The Army.
You were in the Army, girl.
Yeah,
Yay.
we're the family that bleeds green.
Well, yay. Um, and then did you decide to join the Army? I got to backtrack a little bit.
Mhm.
Did you decide to join the Army because it was your family? You're fulfilling the family legacy?
So it was multi-layered. I'm a Army legacy. My brother's just hit 20 years, or is just hitting 20 years.
Okay.
My dad and my mother both met while they were serving at Fort Huachuca. My
Oh my
uncle was in the
goodness.
service. My grandfather was in the service, and we've had a family member fight in every major conflict since the War of 1812. So a lot of it is that legacy, that there's a debt to be owed, and you owe it. Um, I'm also, my brother joined the service. I followed him 11 months directly in his footsteps, like
Oh my
he was the
goodness.
same trade outpost. My little brother was going to war, and I looked at my two small children, and I would rather fight in the streets somewhere else than have the fight in their streets. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So it's in your DNA,
it is in my DNA.
the service component and protection the
Hmm.
component. And then were you weightlifting before the military, or was that
Actually,
part
when
of
I
it?
got out.
Actually, when you got out.
Hmm.
Gosh.
Well, I mean, they got me in such great shape. Why wouldn't I keep it?
That's true. That's true. And then did you decide to join the American Legion on your own, or is that also part of the family legacy?
No, my husband and I'm sure not unlike a lot of people, we moved into a neighborhood and there was a American Legion within walking distance of a Friday night in our
Uh-huh.
new house.
Okay.
We started going, and it was a very welcoming post at the time. And my husband, it served a tour in Iraq and Afghanistan. And it was
Mhm.
the first time eventually that I saw him relax in public.
Oh,
So it was at that point that I pretty much said, whatever this organization needs, I'm going to give. And then
okay.
as I learned more about the history of the organization, its national platform, its national influence, um, I was that much more committed to the American Legion and their greater purpose.
Well, I'm glad that you're a part of the American Legion. Yeah, your drive, and your commitment. It sounds, because I met you as a white hat, and
Mhm.
just found out you're the
I knew
JAG.
I had.
Yeah, you're the JAG, and so you're appointed. I'm assuming.
Yes, yes. The JAG is an appointed position and ratified by the DEC.
Okay, and so you inform the Department of Arizona
Hmm.
of the legal issues, and then help develop that so we can continue to be the American Legion and to do things to serve our community. But there are also those legal pieces. But thank you for the background. I really want to focus in on. It sounds like your expectations of who you are in this world changed to a huge degree.
Hmm.
and you are on the other side, maybe, or it's a different future that you have now.
Yes. So, um, you're never all the way on the other side because you're still walking the
Mhm.
same path.
Okay.
And you have good days and you have bad days, just like anyone else. I'm certainly not perfect by any stretch of the imagination or done with all my work.
Yeah.
But yes, I completely had to redefine who I was to find contentment with myself. And I kind of looked at what I'm capable of doing and what I'm no longer capable of doing. And instead of
Oh,
focusing on what I'm not capable of doing anymore, focusing on what I can. There's nothing wrong with my brain, right?
right. I can attest to
And
that.
so we talk about a little bit at the Legion. I am. I don't want to. How do I say this? My experience gives me a level of empathy that you almost have to earn. You can't. You're not just given it. You have to. You have to earn it, and there's only one way to earn it, and it's it's through the school of hard knocks. um, so I'm able to bring a very unique perspective to situations that are highly emotionally charged,
Oh,
to ground people
yeah.
sometimes.
You're talking about compassion, that capacious, that ability to draw on your experience and provide empathy because you're
Mm-hmm.
quite familiar with that experience and the way it makes you feel and thought of all of
Mm-hmm.
that. And in the world of faith groups, compassion is earned. You don't become empathetic aside from experiences, do you?
No,
But you could always choose the other road because the other path is the end,
right.
the
You could always choose
destruction.
apathy.
Hmm.
You could always choose apathy, I suppose.
You could, and I think the richness is in choosing the empathy piece, isn't there? Because you smile a lot.
It is. It is. It is definitely the better of the two choices.
Mm.
Um, it's. I don't take life as serious as most of my contemporary age group. So I spread a lot more joy. Life is, I know how, you know, I think the people who are faced with their own mortality have different perspectives, and there's different ways of dealing with that trauma. And I
Right.
choose to embrace the little kid in me, the joy. You know,
Yeah.
um, they say that children see God the clearest
Yeah.
because they're able to stand in awe of things.
Yeah. Were,
And
were you raised in a faith group?
I was actually raised in a non-denominational
Okay.
Protestant family, I guess.
Mhm.
But I got to ask a lot of questions. I didn't understand how there could be so many religions and think
Oh,
that
sure.
mine had the only answer. So I was very lucky that I had open minded parents who took me around to synagogues and Seventh day
Oh,
Adventist churches and the Mormon churches and various different religions and allowed me to learn and experience from all of them.
uh-huh. Has that has your faith in what you believe about who you are in this world, was that helpful for you when you 600 pounds to cane?
It absolutely was
Yeah.
helpful. Not in the immediate though.
Okay.
Not in the immediate. It was helpful in, you know, you like to think that you have a purpose, right? That God's put you on
Mhm.
this planet for a specific purpose.
Right.
And sometimes it's just to live, a good normal life for others to follow. And there is a there is actually a quote by one of my favorite human beings, Brene Brown.
Okay. Yes.
And she says, one day you will tell your story of how you overcame what you went through, and it will be
Uh-huh.
someone else's survival guide.
Oh, yep.
So,
I,
with all of the things that I have gone through, I also raise a severely an autistic, severely mentally ill child. On
mhm.
top of it, um, there's definitely moments where you're like, okay, I'm tired of being Job, God. Like, this gets a little ridiculous. Um, but to understand that you're suffering, sometimes the purpose of your suffering is twofold. One, it's to give the people around you the opportunity to learn grace and patience and
Mm.
strength and empathy. Or sometimes your experience, you have to go through it because you've been given, or I feel like I've been given the strength to go through it, if for no other purpose than to be very transparent about my life. So the next person going through something similar can come to me and I can cut out the roadblocks for them
Mm.
or be what they need me to be in that moment to help them get through it.
That sounds like a lot of soul searching that you've done to be able to define your purpose so clearly.
Oh, and a
And
lot
so,
of therapy.
and a lot of therapy.
Therapy.
Talk therapy has a beautiful place, doesn't it, to help
It
us
does.
unpack. There's something
Absolutely.
about saying it out loud that helps clarify
Oh,
what's
yes.
going on inside.
Absolutely. Because your brain
Yeah.
likes to lie to you a lot. So,
Hmm.
yeah,
And
I'm
Brenny Brown, yeah, we're very thankful that there are. I appreciate the internet. The squirrel, I appreciate the internet because I can bring Brenny Brown into my home,
mm-hmm.
you know? And
Yes.
so, but what's available to listen to sometimes can serve us or not serve us. So, yeah,
Right.
finding what's going to inform who we are.
Mm-hmm.
So, how did you become the JAG?
So I like rules.
Okay. All right.
No, I have a background in business, so
Uh-huh.
people forget that the American Legion is a corporation. All of our posts are incorporated.
Mhm.
Um, so there are more than just our traditions we have to adhere to, and not everyone in the Legion has run a business or been a part of
Yeah.
having to do the CYA portion of running a business.
Yeah.
And I have. So some of it was self-preservation at the
Oh,
post level, like, hey guys, there's some liability here. Uh, and then unfortunately that eagerness to learn, because I don't
uh-huh.
like to not know things, uh, kept
Got you.
moving me from position to position where someone also realized that I'm also willing to say, no, that's not right. And you could have done it for the last 60 years, but you need to do it right moving forward. And I'm okay being that person to say that. So I keep being the jag.
And I have found that people that are okay being that type of person, being the hit guy, if you will, to absorb that, the shocks and the disgruntlement, are people that have suffered. Because you have a wider spectrum of the good and the bad,
Mm-hmm.
and it's okay down on the bad side too. You know
Yeah.
how to get in the muck.
Yeah, I know how to get in the muck.
Know how to get in the muck, and then kind of know that lifeline to help them get out. And we all kind of do it in our own way,
Mm-hmm.
right? And for me, that's one of the beauties of the American Legion is we have such a variety of individuals with
Mm-hmm.
different jobs, different services, times in service, and we come together and we work it out.
You're definitely a motley crew.
A motley definitely can get mucky,
Mm-hmm. Pretty
and
quick.
so
Pretty quick.
pretty pretty quick. And one of the reasons I really wanted this podcast spotlight on spirit is because for me, and it sounds like for you, is what you believe about who you are,
Mm-hmm.
enriches and informs, and it
Mm-hmm.
can change throughout, and it can be challenged,
Mm-hmm.
but we need to talk about it,
Absolutely.
because there are other individuals that might be struggling, and to be able to reach out and to listen in on Jaclyn talking about going from this person
Mhm.
to this person. What about your identity has stayed the same? And what's changed? And so that's a question too. What about your identity has stayed the same and what changed?
So luckily, I was given a pretty strong foundation by my family as to, while we weren't overtly, we went to church every Sunday, but
Sure.
we weren't the super Christians.
Okay.
We were more people of a quiet faith. Our faith
Mhm.
require ritual or dogma. It was a pretty simple Christian philosophy, which was
Mm.
Jesus died for all people, for all time, for all sins.
Okay.
Period. And then just be a good person. Like that
Be a
was it.
good person.
Be a
Yeah.
good person. I'm pretty simple.
Be a
Um,
good.
so uh, has my faith changed at different points where I needed different things? Different churches have given it to me. I have a hard time within an organized religion setting. Um,
Mm-hmm.
my philosophy is churches are for the sick. They should be hospitals for the sick, and I think
Okay.
often that is forgotten in religion today. So for me, church can be anywhere. It is anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but but ultimately it is my faith that keeps me here on earth. You know, um, you know, when things get really bad, I have to remember that, one of my children when it's asked me, what do you think heaven's like? And without even thinking about it, I go, no pain,
Oh.
you know? So the, the idea that this is a temporary situation sometimes
Oh.
is very important, that this is only a temporary situation and eternity is very long.
Right. And what will that look like? But it's not going to be pain.
It's not going to be
The
pain.
lack of suffering, emotional, physical, soul pain.
No.
No, there'll be clarity and clearness and joy. And
Hmm.
I think all faiths have that as their goal too, right?
Yeah, there are similarities across
Mhm.
every religion, and that's one of them. Even the Buddhists, where they're just not wanting, like, it's still ending suffering, right?
Yeah.
Nirvana is the end of suffering.
Yep.
So, yep, it is a common theme across all religions.
I know in our culture today, we're really struggling to a large degree about when is enough and when am I going to check out?
Hmm.
When is too much for me?
Hmm.
And to sometimes I believe in my faith um, that serving another human being, and the American Legion does this, is one of the great gifts that we have for each other.
Hmm.
And then suffering does have a place in this world,
Hmm.
even though none of us want to suffer, right?
Hmm.
But when you remove yourself from the equation, you know, to a large degree, you're depriving you and the rest of us to develop even deeper. Suffering, I don't think that there's a purpose for everything on earth. I'm just going to lay it out there.
Okay.
Because then I think we get really goal oriented in our lives,
Mhm.
like trying to discover the purpose for the suffering. But sometimes the suffering or the struggles are part of life.
Sometimes suffering is just suffering.
Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily serve a purpose. I'm
Yeah.
when I say that my suffering has served a purpose, it serves a purpose because I choose to have it serve a
Yeah.
purpose. Which is a distinction. It's not something that just organically happened. It was something I
Yeah.
chose to do, and
Yeah.
I still actively have to choose to do it. I think I kind of understand where you're going with this question or in regards to suicide is when
Yeah.
is suffering is it justified? There are plenty of religions
Oh,
that
sure.
taking your own life is the absolute worst thing you can do, right? I
Oh,
mean,
definitely. Yep.
um,
Yep.
obviously we come from a demographic where suicide is, the one our most important topic. Um, and I've lost many a friend to their internal demons.
Yeah.
Um, and and we can talk all day long about the culture of
Oh,
military
definitely.
and post-military service and how it contributes to that. But in the sake of like just in general, I don't think that as an individual you get to say for another human being what how
Yep.
much suffering they're able to
Yep.
process,
Yep.
um, or um, or judge it. Not
Yep.
really.
Yep.
Um, I had, so full disclosure, I have, my son has been actively suicidal since he was 15 years old.
Mm.
So I've had to do a lot of therapy and learning on the subject of suicide.
Yep.
Um, it's, to me, it's not a selfish act in any way, shape, or form.
Mhm.
Um, so I don't judge it harshly. I can feel its pain. Um, Probably because, like most people who've been in this situation where you've considered it, you kind of understand that the hellscape that is mentally, emotionally, physically, that person was in.
Yeah.
Um, and a lot of it comes with their own shame, right?
Yep.
What what could I have done? And the reality is, a lot of times, not much. Um, for my son, I call him my favorite hero because every day he chooses to stay here. But the likelihood of my losing him to suicide is probably about 80% at some point in his life.
Mhm.
Um, and there's no way I could be angry with him for it at all. Um, he has situations that can't be treated medically. He's physically, emotionally, and mentally in distress every day. The fact that he still is here at almost 26 is pretty impressive. That's 10 years of battling demons without help, and I mean, he's my little hero.
Right.
But I don't get to judge for him what's too much
Yeah. Yeah.
or
Our
what is not enough.
expectations.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the whole conversation is really framed a lot around our expectations
Mm-hmm.
of human life.
Mm-hmm.
As what is a good age, what type of death do you have,
Mm-hmm.
and somehow we have a role in determining that,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes we do
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes we don't.
Right.
And so for me, the conversation about suicide is really can be deepened by thinking about what is our purpose in this world, how do we live each day,
Mm-hmm.
what are we going to live for.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the conversations that I think can be very respectful for everybody, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And what do we do with individuals that do suicide? How do we handle that after? I have friends whose children have suicided,
Mm-hmm.
and walking alongside that process is difficult. Um, and so I know for people when they're trying to figure that all out. And then Dr. Kevorkian, that was probably in your experience too.
Eugenics, my favorite topic as a
Yes,
disabled person.
yes. And then he ended up helping usually middle-aged women die the most. who
I
didn't
remember.
want to be a bother to the rest of their
Mhm.
family.
Mhm.
So that there's that element of community again that keeps coming surface to what we how we define our lives.
Right. I mean, if you a lot of what people, when they struggle with things, it's normally going to be feeling as though they're a burden to those they love, or dealing with such deep seated shame that even in a room full of people they feel lonely, you know. So for individuals like that, it's access to care is a huge one, whether it's straight mental health care, or your worship team that's helping you, or a support group, whatever it is, just access to care. But it is very difficult to look at someone
Yep.
for whom there is no hope for a brighter future, right? Because we always say it's a permanent solution to a temporary situation. Well, for some people, that's not a temporary
No.
situation. It's their permanent state of being.
Yeah.
Um, so it's not as cut and dry as
No.
people like to think it is. And I try not to judge it too much. Save who you can save, and try to
Yeah.
have some empathy for, you know,
And the beauty of our belief systems allow us to live into walking alongside another human being
right.
with that focus of loving
Hmm.
without the judgment piece.
It's not my job to judge.
But gosh darn it, us humans, right?
Or we really like to do it, though.
Oh my God. I think it just makes us feel better if we're able to put people here, put people there,
Hmm.
that judging piece, and cleans it up. Because I think loving can be messy.
Loving is messy. Actually, it's probably the messiest thing you can do, right?
Oof.
I it's also very difficult. Even people who like had childhood trauma with people pleasers, or
Mhm.
um, or any kind of trauma, they're not always empathetic, right?
Yep.
Because
Yeah.
it is somewhat of a choice. You have to choose to sit in the dark with someone else.
Mhm.
It's still a choice, and some people aren't capable of doing that because they haven't done any work inside to be
Yeah.
able to do that. Um, we we've recently gone through what I would say is a decade of toxic positivity, live, laugh, love, all that stuff. That we have forgotten that life is messy and difficult and painful and
Yeah.
stressful, and um,
What do
you
you
know
do with the yuck?
it is, and
Yeah.
there's a line in a television show that I've never watched, but someone sent
Uh-huh.
it to me, and it was from Sex and the City, which I've never watched. And one of the characters gets breast cancer. And
Oh,
she's telling her girlfriends that she has breast cancer. And it was immediately like, you're gonna beat this, and this is great, and we're gonna go get this doctor and this and this and this. And finally she was like, shut up. Like,
yeah.
I need you to stop and just allow me to be scared and not alone with my fear.
Yeah. Yeah. My years of working in hospice, and as well as with the military and in treatment centers, taught me that um, all of our experiences, this is our house. They
Hmm.
don't go away. We might be able to shove them in a closet for decades, but they're going to come out.
Yes.
They need to breathe, and they need to be validated, if you will, of
Hmm.
their existence. It's just what do we do with those experiences that will determine what type of a situation, or experience it is. Is it something that fosters love, or is it something that fosters shame?
Hmm.
And so, what do we do with that? Um, there's that book, Your Body Keeps the Score by, is it Bessel Van Kolk, whatever. I have it right here. Sorry, I actually have it right here. Bessel van der Kolk, this one,
Hmm.
that our experiences, as you were alluded to at the beginning, you know, somehow are wrapped up in ourselves.
Hmm. Oh,
So,
the studies have definitely shown that trauma, specifically childhood trauma, completely changes your immune system and your nervous system and the way that your brain develops forever, and you can't walk that back. And then any kind of trauma, we know that PTSD is not just an emotional thing; it changes the anatomy of the brain.
yeah.
Trauma has a physical effect on our bodies. So yeah, absolutely. It's not just a mental thing. And I always remind people, I'm like, the brain is just an organ. It fails just as well as any other organ in the body does.
And there's not always a redo. Like, oh, we
No,
get it now. Now we're going to redo.
right.
But
Right.
so much of our lives are cumulative. And so each and every day, we have a choice of how we're going to live. Are we going to put polka dots on that cane? Or are we going to beat
Right.
people over the head with it because they're in our way?
Exactly.
Yes.
I try not to hit people with it, just to be clear.
Both. Oh, it depends on what's happening around you.
But it does. It's a choice. It's not an
Yeah.
easy choice.
Mm.
It took a couple years.
Did it?
I think I broke a few kitchen chairs or something along the way while I was coming through acceptance. Like I said, saint like husband. Um,
Yeah.
it wasn't easy. Once I got there, it's easier to wake up every morning and make that choice.
Mm.
You know, um, you'll always hear things like, "Oh, I don't let the disease define me." Well, I mean, it kind of does. Like
Mhm.
things that limit your life limit your life. Uh,
Yeah.
you can just choose to change how you operate within a new operating system,
Yeah.
a new environment.
It sounds like you have a loving person
Mm.
that
Yeah.
was the lifeline for you too.
Yeah. I don't. I'm sure I would have gotten through it without him,
Mm.
um, but I wouldn't have had a safe space to do it in.
Right. Yeah, because you can't put all I'm here only because of you. That's a large amount of responsibility that is unfair to put on somebody.
Yeah.
It's only because of you. No, that's unfair.
He gave me the space to have my anger and my
Mm.
guilt and work through my own internal to fight my own internal battles. But he stood next to me while I did it. He couldn't fight them for me, but he gave me a safe space in which to do it and support me while I did it. He also, agreed in our vows that he would chase me around in a rascal so that it was fair in a race. So, yeah, I mean, obviously someone else can't do the work for you, but I was very blessed that I had someone, that allowed me to be me and kept challenging me to be a better version of me while I was going through it as well.
Well, I'm glad that he was there with you too. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Um, are there any parting words of wisdom or thoughts that you'd want to share?
So, I mean, like on the Legion side or just in life in general?
That's totally up to you. Could do a both and, that's totally up to you.
Okay. So I'll start with the easy one. I'll start with the Legion one. So
Okay.
I just recently gave a class on, corporate law and
Oh,
nonprofit law and liquor law. And we were talking about individuals having their canteen privileges suspended. And
oh,
I stood at the front of the class and I said, I want you to think about this, that you have an individual that comes in your post and they're drinking and they're behaving in a way that's not normal for them. They're yelling at the bartender, they're cursing, they're angry, they're acting
mhm.
out of character. And your response is to suspend their canteen privileges for 30 days because their behavior was not tolerable. I go, have you ever thought that perhaps that individual just find out that their wife has cancer that day,
Mhm.
or that their battle buddy took their life, or they lost their job, or their child was diagnosed with some kind of disease,
Mhm.
or fill in the blank? And instead of stepping in and wrapping your arms around your brother or sister, you took away what is supposed to be their safe space that provides them with support in those times. So maybe before you go here, maybe you should step in and ask what's going on with that individual if that behavior is not their normal. Obviously, we always have the one that's always cranky,
Yeah.
but before you jump to reprimanding, go be a human first.
The American Legion has the opportunity to do that, don't
We
we?
do. We
Yeah.
do.
I need to make a clarification on this because the Department of Arizona, um, you have all of your posts incorporated,
Yes, all of our posts are incorporated.
and that is not something that all
Right.
departments
I know all departments
have.
are different all across the board.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but for Department of Arizona, you
All of our
have
posts
that,
are incorporated. Hmm.
which protects all posts. Every post that's incorporated is protected as a
As
good
long as they
job.
continue to file their taxes.
So thank you for that. But the opportunity to be a human is what you're going to leave us with.
Hmm.
Lead out with human.
Always lead with being human first.
Okay. Well, thank you.
And, you know, you don't have to be a bright light,
Hmm.
just a little light in the dark.
Just a little light in the dark. Thanks, Jaclyn.
Thank you, Golly.
Thanks.